Yo YouTube, what's going on? It's your boy SalvationsElite, and we are back with another video, guys. And today we're talking about OpTic again. I mean, there's just been a lot of news coming out these last few days about OpTic, and I just think it was worthwhile addressing kind of the updated situation and basically the outcomes that we potentially could have at this point, because it's finally starting to narrow down about what could actually happen. So just today in this video, we're just going to go over the 3 outcomes for Call of Duty as a brand, and then the 3 outcomes for the Call of Duty team as a squad. So I just want to kind of separate those because there are some differences for what could happen with OpTic and what could happen with the Call of Duty team as a whole. And so I just want to address all 6 of those potential options and go through them all. Now, also, the gameplays you guys are seeing right now are just going to be hardcore free-for-all gameplays. So literally yesterday I just hopped on Call of Duty, like what haven't I played this year? Like, what have I never played on Black Ops 4? And I'm like, I've never once hopped into a hardcore free-for-all game. So literally I hopped into 2 games, and these are kind of like the 2 games that ended up happening. So that's what I decided to use for the video today. But yeah, the whole OpTic situation still really sucks, and it's not looking good for the green wall in general. Basically, Hecz was just on Nadeshot's podcast. It was the first episode of Nadeshot's new podcast. It's called Selfmade with Nadeshot, which, first of all, you guys should go check out because it's awesome. I've always loved Nadeshot, and so for him to start a podcast, I've been wanting to do that for a long time, so I'm pretty excited about that. But anyway, he talked about the situation on that podcast, and also Crunchbase, which is a website that talks about business dealings, and it also talks about esports as well. They updated their page for the Infinite Esports group, which is the group that owns OpTic, obviously, that Immortals had acquired Infinite. It's not official yet because there hasn't been a statement released, but it was reported by a few esports insiders that that was the case, that Immortals did in fact finish the purchase of Infinite. So from here on out, we have to talk about that. And then Hecz, like I said on Nadeshot's podcast, gave a little update. He talks about his bid for OpTic and Immortals' bid for OpTic and kind of how that all played together. So let's roll that clip real quick, and we'll talk about it afterwards.
Okay, so where is OpTic going? What is OpTic going to be? This is
as of this moment, and it's public, obviously, that Immortals is making a bid for it. It wasn't as good as the bid that I submitted to get OpTic back, but for some whatever reason.
Wait.
Yeah.
You submitted your own bid to buy OpTic back yourself?
Yep. Yeah.
Explain that.
Explain me. So it was simple.
Explain
6 months ago, I approached the ownership group. 7 months ago, I approached the ownership group, and I said, let me get OpTic back. I wasn't asking for a discount. I was trying to make them some money, so they, whatever. We gave it a good run. It's not working. I tried to warn them at the beginning of the year that, what was happening at that point in time was not, it just wasn't sustainable, and
you're just spending too much money on the wrong things, or what made it non-sustainable?
Well, I mean, without going into specifics, a lot of things. For me, it was more about the culture and the culture that they were creating within that space. It was not going to fit what we have built for 7 years, and you can't change culture.
So Hecz said for whatever reason, Infinite chose not to go with Hex's bid and decided to go with Immortals' bid. Although Devin Nash, who's a esports guy, he is an analyst. He has a YouTube channel. He runs a little an esports org of his own as well, and he talked about it on his YouTube channel. He has pretty good insight into the business world and how these types of dealings would work, and he talked about the whole situation in his video, so I recommend go checking that out. So kind of how this all plays out is that Infinite didn't necessarily have anything against Hecz, but more that they had more incentive to sell to Immortals because it looks better for their portfolio. Since Infinite Esports is just an investing group, their end-all goal is to sell OpTic. Their goal was to sell OpTic, sell their business at a profit a few years down the road. And so selling to Immortals, who's backed by some very well-known investing firms, very successful companies and individuals, versus selling to Hecz, who's just some guy, esports guy, when that comes to looking down the road into other investments and trying to buy other businesses and businesses being comfortable selling to Infinite, it works way better for Infinite's reputation in the business world versus selling to Hecz. So that's kind of where the difference lies, unfortunately. And that's why Hecz would have to have a pretty significantly bigger bid than Immortals to probably overcome that advantage that Immortal currently has, that leverage that Immortal has. So that leads us to the question of what's next. Where's OpTic going to go? What's going to happen with OpTic? And that's kind of what we have to discuss for the rest of this video, or what are the possible outcomes from here on out. So basically for OpTic as a brand, there's basically about 3 outcomes that make the most sense, and that's kind of what some of the articles have been talking about. That's kind of what Devin was talking about in his YouTube video, and just from what I've been thinking about and what actually makes sense from my experience in the sport management world and in esports world in general, what actually would make sense for OpTic moving forward, and what makes sense for Immortals moving forward as well. So these are all based on the assumption that Immortals will buy Infinite. So the first option is that Immortals lets OpTic remain as a brand kind of as what it is. Now we don't know whether or not that would be as an esports team / brand or just as content creators and as a content brand. We don't know, but either of those would be potentially an option. OpTic just remains as is controlled by a different directing group that's not Infinite now, and then they just work as whatever they are currently, and that's kind of just what they are. The one thing that's for certain, that is undoubtedly for sure true, is that the League of Legends spot will be controlled by Immortals, and that's what Immortals is most interested in. So more than likely, I don't see a world where Immortals has a League of Legends spot as OpTic, but actually uses that League of Legends spot as Immortals, which I think is the most likely option. That's basically, I think, set in stone. That's what's going to happen for sure, because they're pretty dead set on that League of Legends spot. So the three teams that are still really up for grabs are the CSGO team, the Gears team, and the Call of Duty team. Based off of the rules for the Overwatch team, it sounds like that's not an option. They have to sell the Overwatch team. So I think that's going to be basically for sure set in stone, as well as that they're going to have to sell them. So anyway, that basically is the first option, that they're just going to remain as OpTic or whatever is left of OpTic. The next option is that Immortals just rebrands everything that OpTic currently is as Immortals. And Hecz and Nadeshot actually mentioned this option in their podcast, or in the podcast, in Nade's podcast. And Hecz, I'll just play the clip for you, but it's pretty ironic.
You tried to buy OpTic back. Immortals has made a bid for OpTic.
Yep.
So right now, depending on when this gets uploaded, everybody's freaking out.
Yep.
Everybody's freaking out about the future of OpTic, that it might be dissolved, that it won't exist anymore. Obviously, I think that'd be very dumb from a Immortals standpoint, because OpTic is such a powerful brand.
Well, I've seen crazier shit.
What?
I wouldn't put it past anybody to do just nonsensical stuff.
What are actually very curious, because I guess for me, I still feel attached to the OpTic brand in some way or another. There are just a lot of people that weren't or should have never been responsible for making decisions. And obviously, hindsight is 2020, and I wasn't part of any of that, so I don't know what the mindset was when everything started to unfold. But man, what a tremendous dude. From everybody. Now, I mean, I feel like you didn't have a ton of opportunity to make change from the way that you've laid it out for me, but talk about being handed like a golden opportunity and just squandering it because you don't trust the person that created this brand. You don't trust the players. You don't trust the community. Yeah. And you go and try to oversaturate and overimpose your will and just completely fail. Just a catastrophe. And for it to unravel the way it has, man, it is unbelievable.
Well, the game is still afoot.
Ooh, I like that. The game is still at play.
Are
we in the middle of a game of Jumanji right now still?
Yeah, I think so.
Are pieces still moving?
The pieces are still moving constantly and forever.
That probably.
So yeah, Hecz said he's seen some crazier shiz. He's seen it crazier than this, and so you never know. I just think this is a really dumb option. Like, it would make no sense because you really have to understand like what makes OpTic valuable. Like, why would you pay so much for OpTic to then decimate so much of its value? And like, okay, the fans are at the core of what make OpTic valuable. Obviously, the players have value. The teams that they currently have in those leagues and the winning history that those teams and players have some value. But the fans have the core value of OpTic, the brand itself. And I mean, so that's like the subscribers, the followers, the social media interaction, the viewership, and the merch sales. Like, those all have extreme value, and that all comes from the fan base and the fans that, you know, that bolster that up. And like, if Hecz was to lose, you know, all the control of OpTic, or OpTic just isn't what it is anymore, like, the amount of fans and followers that will just ditch that brand or Immortals, aren't gonna follow Immortals, aren't gonna follow the team because it's not OpTic anymore, is a significant portion of people. And like, it does matter what Hecz says, and Hecz has so much influence over that brand now. Like, if you piss off Hecz, and Hecz is like says screw you, everyone who supports OpTic, let's leave, let's do our own thing, let's create our own brand, screw Immortals, like, that would obviously leave a lasting impact on their brand, on Immortals brand, and how they're perceived in the esports world as a whole. So I'd be really surprised if that would be the option. The third option, which seems to be pretty unlikely, but is by far the best option for the fans, is that Immortals sells the rights to OpTic, the brand of OpTic, back to Hecz, which is still a potential option as long as Hecz can attain that trademark that is the logo, the OG logo, and the brand itself, that maybe he can bring it back. It's so hard to say. We don't know necessarily what Hecz would actually be able to get back. Again, the League of Legends spot is probably chalked, but maybe Call of Duty. But again, we're going to talk about all the Call of Duty team options here in a second. But, you know, CSGO, Gears, the content creators, at least that would be maintained. And Hecz could really start building around the content even more than he currently has. So I think that'd be really cool. And that would probably be the best option for OpTic as a whole, is if Hecz regains full-on 100% ownership of the OpTic brand. Maybe, you know, it takes OpTic back a few steps, but regardless, the OpTic content and the brand itself would still be at the center, and hopefully that would work in some way or another in his favor, you know. Finally, we're just going to talk about directly the Call of Duty team, because I mean, that's what such a huge percentage of the OpTic brand is about, is the Call of Duty team. And there's basically 3 outcomes for the Call of Duty team, and you know, we'll see what happens. So the first one is that Hecz does get back those aspects of OpTic, and one of those is acquiring the Call of Duty team directly from Immortals, and that includes them under the OpTic brand, which is undoubtedly the best option for the fans, and that's exactly what everybody wants. So the next option is that Hecz isn't able to acquire OpTic, but he is able to acquire the Call of Duty contracts. So, you know, Scump, Crim, Karma, Dashy, TJ, they're all under Hecz as an owner now, and they can work through the Call of Duty season in some way, but not using the OpTic brand, which is a possibility. I feel like it's unlikely, but it is a possibility. And then the next option, which is probably the worst option, and unfortunately probably the most likely option, is that Immortals sells off the Call of Duty roster as a whole. The whole team is sold to another org that is already going to purchase a spot into the World League. Because the issue is that apparently the spots for the World League, the bidding process is almost completed or almost done or nearly finished. Based off what the Cod Burner was saying, at least in the past, these last few weeks, it would only make sense that the OpTic roster was then packaged and sold together to one of those orgs that is into the World League. And like similarly, the other option is that they're sold individually to other teams throughout the Pro League, and one by one they're sold, which would really suck for all of them, I think, and is definitely significantly more unlikely to happen than them all being sold as one to another team. But it's hard to say at this point, and both options really suck. So overall, the OpTic situation really blows. Like, it just really sucks to see, because I mean, as a fan of Call of Duty and as a fan of content creation on YouTube, Call of Duty content creation, OpTic's been such a core of that for so long. I mean, I grew up watching Nadeshot and Scump videos early on, and they really got me into Call of Duty, and so it sucks to see this kind of crumbling in a lot of ways, but it's so important for the Call of Duty community to understand what's happening. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, like, comment, favorite, and subscribe. Share the video if you guys really enjoy it. It really sucks. Share all your comments down below. All the OpTic J hate can, you know, it'll probably thrive down below. But anyway, if you guys enjoyed the video, like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if you guys really enjoy it. I really do appreciate all the support. I'm trying to do this long term, and I cannot do that without you guys. The strats videos will be back on the channel tomorrow. So I know I've had a long hiatus from all these strats videos. I'm sorry, guys. I know there's just been a lot of news, the community tournaments and everything, Call of Duty related. So anyway, as always, guys, I'm your boy SalvationsElite, and we'll see you next time. I'm out.